I knew something was wrong the second my bare foot hit the basement stairs and sank into cold water. Not dampness, not a puddle, 3 inches of murky, stinking water that shouldn't exist. My stomach dropped. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't a burst pipe or a failed water heater. This was something worse. I flipped the light switch. The bulb flickered once, twice, then illuminated my nightmare. My entire basement, home office, gym equipment, 20 years of stored memories sat submerged under water the color of mud and betrayal. Papers floated like defeated soldiers. My treadmill stood half drowned. The smell hit me like a fist, rot, mildew, and something chemical I couldn't place. But the real shock came later. After I checked the security cameras and saw them, HOA contractors at 1:47 a.m. digging a trench behind my property, redirecting an entire stream of runoff straight toward my foundation. Not an accident. Not nature. A deliberate water ambush. And that was the moment I realized, if the HOA wanted a flood, they were about to drown in consequences. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that trench-fresh dirt. Tire tracks, bright orange construction cones. The HOA loved buying in bulk. My basement was still damp despite 4 industrial fans running full blast and 2 dehumidifiers humming like angry bees. I'd been pacing my living room since 3 a.m., watching the sky through the window, waiting for dawn. By morning, the clouds hung low and heavy, gray, swollen. That particular feeling right before another downpour. Perfect. Just what I needed. If they'd really dug that trench redirecting runoff, the next rain would prove it without question. I grabbed my work boots, the steel-toed ones I'd had since my construction days, and went outside. The air smelled like wet soil and betrayal. I walked along my back fence, following the property line I'd maintained for 2 decades. 20 years in this house. 20 years keeping everything perfect, following every rule, paying every fee. And this was how the HOA repaid me. I noticed it immediately. The ground sloped differently. Subtle to most people, but obvious to someone who'd grown up helping his father fix farm drainage in rural Georgia. The HOA's so-called landscaping improvements had created a gutter, a literal water highway leading directly to my property line. It looked rushed, sloppy shovel marks, clumps of red Georgia clay, a path of crushed grass stamped flat by boots and equipment. Someone didn't care about quality. They cared about speed and secrecy. I crouched down, running my hand along the newly carved ditch. Cold, damp. The curve of it wasn't natural. No rainfall had carved this smooth channel. This was a human hand deciding the easiest way to protect HOA property was to sacrifice mine. "You're up early." I spun. My neighbor Mark stood at the fence line, coffee mug in hand. Retired firefighter, always awake before sunrise. "Good guy." "Checking the drainage," I said, standing. He raised an eyebrow. "Ah, so you noticed they were out here last night?" My pulse spiked. "Last night? You saw them?" "Oh yeah. Truck came around midnight. I figured it was emergency work or something." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Did they tell you they were digging?" "Of course they hadn't. HOAs never told anyone anything unless it involved a fine." "No," I said flatly. "They didn't." Mark exhaled slowly. "That tracks. People didn't say things like that unless they had history." "Mark," I asked carefully, "has the HOA ever messed with your property?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Not directly, but they regraded the community field a few years back, caused flooding near the townhomes, claimed it wasn't their fault." "And was it?" He scoffed. "Oh, absolutely their fault. But they bullied the residents into shutting up." Bullied. A familiar pattern. As Mark walked away, I stood there staring at the trench, anger slowly brewing into something heavier, determination. If they thought I was just another homeowner who'd shrug and write a complaint email, they picked the wrong guy. I grew up fixing farm drainage. I knew erosion, slopes, grading, and runoff better than most people on that HOA board had ever known anything. Raindrops started falling. Soft at first, gentle pattering like fingertips on glass. Within minutes, it turned into a steady shower. I stayed where I was, watching the water gather, form a stream, and then, just like I feared, race down the trench like a guided missile. The water didn't spread naturally. It funneled, all of it, straight toward my house. The moment I saw the stream curve around the slope and head directly to my basement wall, my hands clenched. This wasn't negligence. This was precision. I marched straight to the HOA office. Still early, but Corintha HOA president was always there. Not because she worked hard, because she liked being important. Sure enough, she was inside, sitting at her desk, typing on her computer like she was drafting the next constitution. I knocked once and pushed the door open. She didn't even look up. "Office hours begin. We need to talk," she sighed dramatically, then turned her head slowly, as if I were interrupting some world-changing operation. "Oh, it's you." Her smile was fake, the kind you could smell from 3 blocks away. "How can I help?" "You redirected the drainage into my property." Her eyebrow twitched, barely, but I caught it. "I'm sorry?" she said. Voice soft, but sharp, like a razor wrapped in silk. "We made some temporary adjustments to community drainage during maintenance. I have footage." Her fingers stopped typing. "Footage?" "Security cameras. Your contractors. 1:47 a.m., digging a trench that leads water straight to my foundation." She leaned back, folding her arms. The fake smile stayed, but her eyes hardened. "Sir, runoff patterns change naturally during rainfall. Perhaps your yard simply isn't graded properly." "My yard hasn't changed in 20 years. "Well," she said, shrugging with exaggerated patience, "properties age. Soil shifts." I stepped closer. "So you're telling me the earth itself spontaneously decided to create a perfect little canal leading to my basement?" She kept the smile, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Fear? Anger? You seem upset," she said, voice dropping to that condescending tone she used whenever she needed to shut someone down. "I understand water damage can be frustrating." "Frustrating?" I planted both hands on her desk. "My basement is flooded because of work your contractors performed without notifying residents." Her fingers tapped the desk impatiently. "Drainage approval is HOA business, not yours." There it was, the HOA motto: "We do what we want. You deal with the consequences." I laughed under my breath. "Funny. Last I checked, my property isn't HOA jurisdiction." Her lips thinned. She didn't like being reminded of that. She opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. "You should review the bylaws." "Landscape infrastructure," I repeated slowly. "Not digging covert trenches that flood homes." She offered a dismissive wave. "If you believe there's been an issue, you may file a complaint." Her voice shifted to pure condescension. "But I warn you, basements flood for many reasons. You don't want to embarrass yourself by accusing the HOA of something well beyond your understanding." Beyond my understanding. That phrase lit a fire in me. I leaned forward. "Corintha, if the HOA caused this, I'm not filing a complaint. I'm filing a claim." Her smile finally cracked. "A claim? Against the HOA?" "That's right." She stood abruptly, voice rising. "You cannot accuse us of wrongdoing without evidence." "I have evidence." The color drained from her face for a split second, but she recovered fast. Her talent was pretending nothing ever rattled her. "Well," she said, smoothing her blazer, "feel free to pursue whatever actions you believe are appropriate." Translation: "Go ahead. You'll lose." I left her office without another word. Outside, rain was coming down harder, pounding the pavement with increasing fury. I walked back home, feeling that mix of rage and resolve tightening in my chest. I knew what had to be done. And I knew the HOA would do everything in their power to stop me. The smell hit me first when I opened the basement door the next morning. Damp wood. Soggy insulation. The sharp sting of mildew growing way too fast for comfort. I walked down the stairs slowly, every step squishing beneath my feet. The fans weren't doing much anymore. They were fighting a losing battle. I turned the corner and flicked on the lights. More water. Much more. It wasn't standing still this time. It was flowing in, sliding along the floor in thin sheets, before pooling into a large, spreading lake in the center. My gym mat floated like a sad island. A box of old photos sat half submerged, ink bleeding into strange watercolor patterns. And my treadmill, the one I'd just repaired 3 months ago. The belt sagged with moisture. Water dripped from the display panel like the machine was crying. My blood boiled. I pulled out my phone and recorded everything. Close-ups, wide shots, timestamps. I measured water levels with a ruler, photographed the wall where the seepage line had risen even higher than before. If the HOA wanted to play dumb, I'd give them evidence they couldn't ignore. By the time I went back upstairs, the rain had settled into a steady, relentless shower. I called the HOA emergency line. A recorded message. For true emergencies, dial 911. For all other inquiries, please email the HOA office. We respond within 3 to 5 business days. 3 to 5 business days. My basement had turned into a swimming pool and they wanted me to wait a week. An hour later, someone knocked on my door. A big man in a reflective vest. His hat said, Handyman Services. You, the guy with the water issue? He grunted. Who sent you? HOA. Told me to take a quick look. I let him in because at this point I needed someone to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. He walked down the basement stairs, paused halfway, sniffed once, and shrugged. Yeah, looks like water. I blinked. Water? Yep. He crouched and poked the puddle with one finger like testing soup temperature. Damp. I stared at him. Do you have any licensing? He gave a short laugh. Licensing? For water? For drainage. For structural assessment. He shrugged. Lady at the HOA said, you just needed someone to check if it was serious. It is serious. He nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, looks serious. Then, he stood up, wiped his hands on his vest, and said, I'll tell them it's probably your foundation. My foundation? Sure. Could be old. Could be cracked. Stuff happens. He was halfway up the stairs before I processed what he'd said. Wait, you haven't checked the walls? You haven't checked the exterior grating? He shrugged again. Not my job. HOA just asked me to look. Looking's done. And just like that, he left. 5 minutes later, I received an email from Corintha. Our contractor reports that your flooding is due to improper home maintenance and possibly aging structural issues. The HOA cannot be held responsible for individual homeowner upkeep. Please address your foundation problems independently. I actually laughed. A short, humorless laugh from the place inside your soul where patience goes to die. Improper home maintenance. My house was in better shape than most in the neighborhood. I'd waterproofed the basement myself years ago, added sump pumps, sealed the walls 3 times. My foundation was rock solid. I wrote back, your contractor didn't inspect the outside. He didn't take measurements. He touched a puddle and left. Her reply came within minutes. As previously stated, the HOA is not responsible for personal property issues. Please refrain from accusatory language. Accusatory language. Apparently stating facts was now a crime. I saved the emails in a folder labeled Evidence HOA Watergate. Then I stepped outside again, this time in a raincoat, and walked to the back of my house. The trench was twice as full now. Water gushed through it like a river with somewhere important to be. The slope had eroded further, creating a deeper channel. Even worse, the water was visibly carving the ground toward my foundation. Every minute, soil washed away grain by grain. I pressed my hand to the basement wall from outside. It was trembling. Not from collapse yet, but from the pressure of water pushing against it. If this continued for weeks, I could lose a structural wall. My phone buzzed. A call from my neighbor Alicia. Are you dealing with flooding too? She asked, panicked. What happened? My backyard is turning into a swamp. The water isn't draining toward the community ditches, it's coming this way instead. Exactly, I said. The new system the HOA created didn't just target me, it rerouted water for several homes. Did they warn you? No. Did they warn you? The only email I got was about repainting mailbox posts. We talked for a few minutes. Her husband wanted to confront the HOA, but expected they'd say it was normal rain. Another neighbor had noticed pooling. Another saw the HOA truck late at night. This wasn't isolated. This was widespread. And yet they'd sent a handyman with a finger-poking technique to diagnose structural flooding. By mid-afternoon, the rain slowed, but the damage was done. I checked my basement a third time. Water level had risen another quarter inch. Doesn't sound like much, but in a basement, a quarter inch can be thousands of dollars. I took more videos, more photos, more measurements. I wasn't just angry anymore. I felt betrayed. I'd been part of this community long before Corintha showed up with her binders full of bylaws and her obsession with authority. I'd planted trees here, fixed neighbors' fences, shoveled snow for elderly couples. I cared. And the HOA repaid that by drowning my basement to save a few dollars in drainage maintenance. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, writing down everything I needed to do next. Hire a real professional inspector. Document every interaction. Get weather reports. Get soil composition maps. Get runoff diagrams. Track water flow patterns. I wasn't going into the next HOA meeting as an angry homeowner. I was going in as a man armed with evidence. Because one thing I knew for sure, if they caused this mess, they were going to clean it up and pay for every last drop. I spent the next morning calling every drainage specialist within 50 miles. Most were booked for weeks. Some didn't handle residential work. A few offered to take a look, but made it clear they weren't licensed for engineering reports. I needed someone licensed, certified, someone whose word was worth more than Corintha's snippy emails. That's when I found him, Daniel Pierce, hydrologist and civil engineer. 20 years of experience, specialized in residential flooding cases, had testified in court multiple times against property management groups. Perfect. When I called, his receptionist said he could come that afternoon. I booked it so fast, I nearly hung up before she finished confirming. When Daniel arrived, he stepped out of his truck with calm confidence that immediately lowered my blood pressure. Tall, mid-50s, waterproof jacket, carrying equipment I didn't recognize, drones, laser levels, soil probes, a tablet strapped to his arm. Basement flooding? He asked. Directed water, I corrected. He paused, eyeing me with interest. Directed how? You'll see. We started outdoors. Within 5 minutes, he was shaking his head. This trench wasn't formed by erosion, he said, crouching. This was cut recently, and not by a professional. He pointed at tool marks along the sides. Someone used a square shovel and didn't even bother smoothing the grade. This is the kind of work you get when people want a fast result, not a correct one. We followed the ditch uphill. He mapped the slope using his laser and tablet, murmuring to himself. Then he stopped. Oh, this is bad. What? He pointed. Your lot is actually slightly higher than the HOA common ground up there. Normally, water should flow away from your property, but they reshaped the terrain. He gestured at a freshly raised slope. That's not natural. Somebody pushed dirt here just enough to make the water divert around it. And right into my house, I finished. Exactly. We kept walking. When we reached the top of the trench, Daniel crouched and took a soil sample. The dirt was loose, freshly turned, still holding the moisture pattern of recent digging. This work was done within the last 72 hours, he confirmed. I felt validation flooding through my chest. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. The HOA did do this. We moved to the back of my house. He inspected the foundation, checked seepage points, tested wall moisture with a probe, documented everything meticulously. This is entirely external water pressure, he said. Your foundation is solid. The waterproofing job you did is holding up well, but nothing is designed to withstand artificially redirected volume like this. He took photos, measurements, and even conducted a dye test, pouring fluorescent solution into the trench and watching it seep into the exact crack in my wall. His final verdict hit like a thunderclap. This flooding is 100% due to improper grading performed uphill on HOA property. They're the responsible party. I exhaled slowly. Can you put that in writing? I can put it in a full engineering report. Video summary if needed. And can you testify? He smiled faintly. If it comes to that, yes. We headed inside. I showed him the basement. He measured water levels, inspected damage, took photos that made my stomach twist, mold forming near baseboards, warping wood, damp insulation. You're looking at tens of thousands in restoration, he said plainly. I nodded. I'd expected that. But the real cost, he continued, is what they'll need to fix outside. They have to correct the grading, install proper drainage infrastructure, waterproof the affected areas. You're looking at, I'd estimate, around $90,000. $90,000? I swallowed hard. And they'll have to pay it? With this report? He tapped his tablet. They won't have a choice. After Daniel left, I sat at my dining table with a folder full of evidence so airtight it might as well have been wrapped in steel. But evidence alone didn't win HOA battles. You had to strategically deploy it, so I prepared for the upcoming HOA meeting. I printed copies of Daniel's preliminary assessment. I printed the photos. I had video ready on a USB stick. I organized my emails from the HOA in chronological order, highlighting every lie, every deflection, every time they blamed me for the mess they created. That night, I barely slept. But this time, it wasn't stress keeping me awake. It was anticipation. The meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. the next evening. When I arrived, the room was packed, more people than usual, probably because the last storm had affected multiple homeowners. I saw Alicia, Mark, at least 6 other neighbors who'd contacted me earlier. Corintha stood at the front, clipboard in hand, wearing a crimson blazer that practically screamed, "I'm in charge." She looked confident. Too confident for someone whose decisions had caused multiple properties to flood. She started the meeting with her usual monotone. Welcome, everyone. Let's keep things orderly and respectful. We'll begin with community updates. I raised my hand. She ignored it. As I was saying, maintenance this month will include... I raised my hand higher. She pressed her lips together. Yes? You have something to add? I have something to present. Her smile froze. Present? It's related to the drainage changes performed 4 nights ago. The room went quiet. People shifted in their seats. Someone muttered, "Finally." Corintha cleared her throat. There were no changes, only temporary adjustments, entirely safe and well within HOA jurisdiction. I walked to the front table, placed a stack of printed reports on it, and plugged my USB into the projector. "What are you doing?" Corintha snapped, showing the truth. The projector flickered on, revealing a high-resolution drone shot of the trench. Gasps rippled through the room. "Wait, that's behind our house too," someone said. I clicked to the next slide. Daniel's analysis, then the dye test video, then photos of my flooded basement. Corintha's face lost all color. This is misleading," she stuttered. "This is one homeowner's interpretation." "Actually," I said, "this is a state-licensed hydrologist's professional assessment with credentials, documentation, and data. Would you like me to read his conclusion aloud?" The room leaned forward collectively. "No," Corintha snapped. But it was too late. People were whispering about the photos, pointing at the trench. A man stood up. "Why weren't we informed of this work?" A woman added, "Why did my kids' playground flood yesterday?" Another said, "My shed has water damage." Corintha tried to regain control. "Everyone, please, we are handling this internally." "No," I said. "You're covering it up." Her composure cracked. "You are being hostile." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "And you are being caught." A few board members exchanged nervous glances. "You redirected water into private properties," I said, projecting my voice so everyone could hear. "Knowingly, without permits, without notifying residents. And then you tried to blame us." Someone shouted, "She needs to resign." Another voice, "We want a vote!" Corintha slammed her clipboard down. "This is absurd!" I clicked to the final slide. Daniel's summary. The phrase in bold, "Flooding is a direct result of unauthorized terrain modification on HOA land." The room erupted. Corintha turned scarlet. You don't understand the budget constraints. We needed a temporary solution until... But she'd said too much. I repeated slowly. Temporary solution. So you did alter the drainage. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I lifted my phone and hit play. Her voice recorded from my previous conversation filled the room. Drainage approval is HOA business, not yours. Checkmate. Corintha grabbed her bag and stormed out amid shouts of angry homeowners, and I knew, standing there watching her leave, that the real battle was just beginning. But now, I had the upper hand. The HOA meeting didn't end so much as it exploded. Even after Corintha stormed out, people kept shouting across the room. Questions, accusations, frustration boiling over after months, maybe years of being ignored. 3 remaining board members gathered behind the table, whispering amongst themselves. They looked shaken, pale, completely unprepared. One of them, thin man with glasses too large for his face, cleared his throat. We appreciate everyone's feedback tonight. We will review the documentation and seek professional consultation. The room erupted again. Review? People's homes are flooding! This is negligence. I raised my voice just enough to get attention. Everyone, please. I get it. I'm furious too, but if we want results, we need to handle this correctly. The shouting dimmed. People turned toward me. I hired the hydrologist because I knew the HOA wouldn't listen otherwise. The report is solid. The evidence is undeniable. If they don't fix this, we have legal grounds. Strong ones. A woman in back asked, "Do you plan on suing?" I answered honestly, "I will if they refuse to take responsibility. And based on the number of you dealing with similar issues, it might not just be me." Another man nodded. "We should unite on this." The board fidgeted uncomfortably. I looked at them. The longer you wait, the worse this gets. Redirect the water back where it belongs. Restore the grading. Fix the drainage system. Repair the damage caused. They didn't answer. The meeting ended shortly after, abruptly, awkwardly, with promises of follow-up communication. The next morning, I woke to aggressive knocking. When I opened the door, there stood Corintha, arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes blazing. Behind her, 2 board members looking like they regretted being dragged along. "Good morning," I said flatly. "This is harassment," she snapped. "Harassment? Yes. You publicly humiliated me last night with fabricated evidence and sensational accusations." The board members exchanged glances. One whispered, "Corintha, maybe we should speak calmly." She whirled on him. "Calmly? He's attacking the HOA." I took a slow breath. First, the evidence isn't fabricated. Second, nothing was illegal. State law allows recording conversations where at least one participant consents. She blinked, thrown off, then recovered. "You manipulated the board." I pointed at the trench. "The trench manipulated them." Her eyes narrowed. "You're going to retract every statement you made, or the HOA will take disciplinary action." Disciplinary action? I stepped onto the porch. "My home isn't even under HOA jurisdiction. You have no authority." "Oh, we'll see about that," she hissed. "You caused chaos. We don't tolerate troublemakers." I actually laughed. "Corintha, you redirected floodwater into my house. That was a maintenance necessity," she shouted. "The community field was eroding. We had to reroute stormwater for one night. Then why is it still rerouted?" She froze. I stepped closer. "You didn't move it for one night. You moved it indefinitely." She swallowed hard but refused to back down. "Regardless, you will not speak about this again." "And if I don't?" She raised her chin. "Then we'll see you in court." I smiled. "Great. I already have a lawyer." Something flickered across her face. Fear. But it morphed quickly into rage. "This isn't over," she spat. "I know," I said. "That's why I'm documenting everything." I lifted my phone and snapped a picture of her on my porch. "What are you doing?" she screeched. "Documenting." She stormed away, board members trailing behind like defeated soldiers. 2 hours later, I received an email. Per HOA bylaws, homeowners are expected to refrain from making defamatory statements about the association. Failure to comply may result in fines. I replied, fines do not apply to non-HOA properties. This is now a legal matter. I attached Daniel's report. That afternoon, another email arrived, this time from the vice president, not Corintha. We would like to meet with you to discuss possible remedies. Translation, we're terrified. I forwarded it to my lawyer. He called immediately. Good. They're panicking. Let's use that. We drafted a formal demand letter. Damages, repair costs, required corrective actions. The number, $89,750. My lawyer sent it with a note. Failure to comply within 7 business days will result in litigation. Less than 24 hours later, the HOA board requested an emergency session with me and my attorney. Corintha was noticeably absent. When I sat across from the remaining board members in a cramped conference room, they looked like they'd aged a decade overnight. They offered coffee, water, cookies, anything to soften the blow. My lawyer didn't accept a thing. Let's get to it, he said. The board attempted diplomacy. We understand your frustration. We acknowledge mistakes were made. We want to find a solution. Community harmony. Then came the offer. We are willing to make repairs. Repairs? My lawyer repeated calmly. Define repairs. One board member fidgeted. We can regrade the trench. Maybe add gravel. My lawyer cut him off. Not enough. Another cleared his throat. We can add a drain. My lawyer shook his head. Not enough. The treasurer whispered. We can waterproof the basement. My lawyer leaned forward. Not enough. The board stared at him, then at me. I folded my arms. You flooded my home. You will install a complete drainage system. Regrade the land professionally. Waterproof the basement. Restore all damaged property. Cover all engineering costs. I added, and you'll remove Corintha from the board. The board exchanged wide-eyed looks. One whispered, we can't just. Another interrupted, actually, we can. The vice president sighed. She violated procedure, hid contractor details, gave unilateral approval. It's grounds for removal. The meeting ended with verbal agreement for now to comply. But verbal wasn't enough. My lawyer smiled as we walked out. They have no choice. They know it. The following week was quiet. Too quiet. Then came a thick envelope, hand-delivered to my mailbox. Inside, a 3-page letter, full of legal jargon the board clearly didn't understand. Signed by Corintha. She wasn't done. According to her official notice, the HOA was rejecting my claims, refusing liability, and accusing me of creating hazardous conditions on my own property that contributed to flooding. She even suggested my landscaping had caused water to flow uphill. Uphill. I read it 3 times just to confirm it wasn't a hallucination. I forwarded it to my lawyer. He called within minutes. She wrote this? Apparently, he chuckled. Good news. This helps us. She made false statements, misrepresented responsibility, contradicted state regulations. Judges love letters like this. He paused. It's also the kind that gets HOA presidents fired. Don't respond, he continued. Let them dig their own hole. 2 days later, the HOA board held an emergency meeting without Corintha. The room was full again. But the atmosphere was different. Tense, heavy, expectant. The vice president tapped the microphone. We need to address recent issues regarding drainage. Someone shouted, You mean the flooding? Another yelled, Where's Corintha? The VP raised his hands. Corintha is no longer acting in her role while we conduct internal review. Internal review. Translation, she's out. People started whispering urgently. Then the VP continued. We've received the hydrologist's report confirming the drainage issue. We recognize our responsibility. The room fell silent. Not a whisper, not a breath. Homeowners weren't used to hearing the HOA admit fault. The HOA will work with a licensed engineering firm to remedy the drainage. Someone clapped, then someone else. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding, but I stayed seated, because I knew it wasn't over. Sure enough, a woman raised her hand. Who approved the trench work in the first place? The VP shifted uncomfortably. That is under investigation. Everyone knew the answer. Before anyone could push further, the door slammed. Corintha barged in like a storm, hair wild, eyes blazing, papers flying from her folder. "I will not be silenced," she shouted. The room froze. The VP whispered, "Oh God." Corintha stomped to the front. "This is a conspiracy, a witch hunt. I did nothing wrong. The drainage trench was necessary. I saved the community from erosion damage." A man yelled, "You flooded our basements." "I did what I had to do for this community," she screamed, banging her fist on the podium. Someone shouted, "You broke the law." Another, "Step down already." Corintha pointed wildly at the VP. "You're spineless, all of you." She jabbed a finger at me. "You're letting him destroy everything we built." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the trench? The illegal modification?" She turned purple. "You caused the flooding." "Right," I said calmly. "The trench you had dug at 1A. Gasps filled the room. Corintha froze. She'd slipped. I continued. "I have footage. Remember?" People murmured, whispered urgently. Corintha tried to recover. "It wasn't my idea. It was. She stuttered, looking around desperately. "The contractor." "Which contractor?" someone asked. She opened her mouth, closed it. No name came out. The VP sighed into the microphone. "Corintha, please leave. The board has voted to suspend your authority." Corintha shrieked, a long, ear-piercing sound that made several people flinch. "I wrote the bylaws. I run this community. You can't do this to me!" But the room wasn't on her side anymore. Neighbors stood. People pointed. A few recorded her meltdown. She backed away slowly, realizing she wasn't just losing the presidency. She was losing control completely. She stormed out, slamming the door even harder than before. The VP addressed me next. "We reviewed your attorney's demand letter. We are prepared to negotiate." "Negotiate?" I asked. "We can offer a portion of the cost, maybe half." The room buzzed with disbelief. "Half won't cover the damage," I said, "and half won't fix the drainage." He winced. "But the HOA budget." "Then reallocate it," someone interjected loudly. My lawyer leaned toward the microphone. "Under state law, the HOA is liable for damage caused by unauthorized land modification. If we proceed legally, the cost will be much higher." The VP slumped. "Will, take that into consideration." The next morning, the HOA released an official statement via email, carefully worded, avoiding words like fault or negligence. But the message was clear. The HOA agreed to fully pay for all drainage corrections, regrading, waterproofing, and basement restoration. Total cost, $90,000. I stared at the email as satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't just about money. It was principle. They'd tried to bury me in water, lied, denied, threatened, twisted every rule to protect themselves. But truth had weight, evidence had power, and Corintha's arrogance had collapsed under pressure. 2 days later, construction crews arrived. Real crews this time. Licensed, professional, equipped with machines, survey tools, blueprints. The HOA board stood far off, watching like people witnessing their own funeral. The workers filled in the trench, restored the original grading, installed a French drain system, sump pump line, drainage channels, soil stabilization grids, waterproof membranes. It took a week. A long, noisy, muddy week. But at the end, my land was better than it had ever been. And the HOA paid for every cent. Corintha? She disappeared. Word around the community. She skipped town after the board voted to remove her permanently. Nobody knew where. Nobody cared. The community held its annual barbecue in the park, a tradition Corintha used to run with military precision. This time the vibe was different. Kids ran around, dogs played fetch, people laughed. Music played without anyone screaming about noise violations. The new board members mingled freely, answering questions. accepting suggestions, even apologizing when needed. Then something happened that caught me off guard. The new HOA President.com guy named Sam stood up and tapped a spoon against a cup. The crowd quieted. "I want to acknowledge someone," he said. "Someone who didn't ask for trouble, didn't want conflict, but refused to let wrongdoing slide." People turned and looked at me. "Oh great, public recognition." Sam continued, "We owe thanks to our neighbor who exposed the issues, documented the evidence, and made sure things were handled the right way." The crowd applauded, loudly, then cheering. I stood there awkwardly, lifting my hands in a please stop gesture, but it didn't work. Sam raised his voice, and because of his actions, the board has passed a new rule. All major landscaping or drainage work must go through full environmental assessment and community vote. The applause grew louder. Later that evening, as the barbecue wrapped up, I took one last walk through the community. People waved from porches. A couple asked questions about drainage systems. It felt surreal. When I returned home, I walked around to the backyard, stood on the edge of the now perfect slope, looking toward the common area beyond the fence. The grass was trimmed, the soil stable. The drainage path flowed naturally exactly the way nature intended. A small bird landed near the new drain exit point, pecking at moist soil. Peaceful, normal, right. I realized something then. This wasn't just about repairing damage or getting compensation. It was about drawing a line that said, you don't get to push people around. You don't get to bully homeowners. You don't get to cover up mistakes. You don't get to gamble with someone else's property. And you definitely don't get to dump floodwater into my basement, not without consequences. As the last glow of sunlight faded, I closed my eyes and just listened. No dripping, no rushing water, no fear, just silence, clean and dry. For the first time in a year, I felt like I could finally exhale. They tried to drown me. Instead, they rebuilt my home, got investigated, got replaced, and learned a lesson so expensive, it might as well be engraved on a plaque. A plaque that would read, "Next time, don't mess with the guy downhill." But life has a way of reminding you that victories are never quite complete. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my door. Plain, white, no stamp. No return address. Just my name typed across the front. I opened it slowly. Inside, a single page. Printed, anonymous. "Congratulations on your victory, but you should know, the drainage issue wasn't the only problem buried in this community. Your predecessor, the one who owned your home before you, knew that. Corintha knew that. And there are others still looking into it. The question isn't whether they'll come back. The question is, will you be ready when they do? A friend." I read it 3 times, turned it over. Nothing on the back. Looked at the envelope. No postmark. Hand-delivered. Someone had been on my property last night. While I slept, someone was watching. And whoever sent this Corintha, someone else, was telling me this war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. I folded the letter, walked inside, locked the doors, went to my closet and pulled out the steel lockbox I'd kept since my construction days. Inside, copies of every document, every email, every photo, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. I added the letter to the pile. Tomorrow, I'd call my lawyer, show him this, start asking questions about what happened before I moved in. Tonight, I'd sleep with one eye open. Because whatever Corintha had been covering up, whatever secret this community was hiding, it was still out there, still buried, still waiting. Let them come. I'd fought one war, and won. I could fight another.